Yep. All right, we'll bring this meeting back to order. It's 9:09, so I gave us an extra 2 minutes. We will move on to agenda item 30. This is a public hearing number 3. Consideration of proposed maps for district voting divisions per California Election Code sections 110A2 and 110B. And I will turn this over to our city attorney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As you may know, there have been many meetings on this districting item. We are required to do so. We met on September 7th, September 21st. We're in the middle of a series of hearings. This is hearing number, I believe, 3 that we're doing. There will be 2 more hearings after this. The goal and intent of tonight is for our demographer, Mr. Robert McIntyre, to present us with some maps that have been produced for the council to take a look at. And what we would appreciate as staff coming away from this is which map or maps are the city council inclined to move forward on, and what order or sequence would they like to hold the elections on. So those are our 2 main goals tonight, and I will turn it over to the demographer, Robert McIntyre for NDC. Thank you, Robert.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. This is your second step in a rather long journey of drawing your district lines. And at the conclusion of the last meeting, we spent most of the time in the last meeting talking about the principles of map drawing. We talked about some of the federal laws. We talked about in having roughly equal population size districts. We talked about the fact that we can't gerrymander based on race or voting propensity. We talked about some of those state factors, including the Fair Map Act and the idea that we need to have contiguous maps that don't bypass neighborhoods to pick one set of voters over another. We try to draw compact maps, meaning as close to a circle as we can. And we say that knowing that we have irregular shaped territories. We also want to take into mind some traditional mapping characteristics that are allowable, but they're not really spelled out quite so clearly in law. They're just traditional mapping characteristics. And some of those things would include, for example, observing the will of the voters in the last election. The voters put you in office, and to the extent we can draw maps that allow the voters to determine your fate as elected, we want to do that rather than have the demographer's pen do that. But we have to, that would be a 3rd tier factor. So federal tier first, state tier, then those 3rd tier factors. And so with that in mind, we, with National Demographics, drew some maps for the council. It was my understanding from district council that, or the district's attorney, the city's attorney, that there were no maps submitted by any of the community members. So tonight we have 3 maps by National Demographics and 1 directed by the council for discussion. The first map we have up here tonight is actually, I'm going to go a little bit out of order. I'm going to talk about the green map. And we do have a web viewer, so we have the ability to really drill in if there's very specific questions about a particular area or street where dividing lines are. We can do that with the web viewer, but this is probably the cleanest to look at. The green map, you might recall one of the things we talked about at the last meeting was that you're going to have a population deviation. You can't draw perfect maps, but we need to make sure the difference between the highest, most overpopulated district and the lowest, most underpopulated district does not exceed 10% population deviation. And so when we look at the green map has a population deviation of 5.04%, well within the federal guidelines. In this particular case, districts 3 and 4 have the ability for protected class voters to attain a plurality. And this happens because when we looked at some of your protected class voters in the demographic data, we see that, for example, in your total population of Latinx voters, it's 31% of your total population. And Asian Americans are 23% of your total population. And so because you don't have a larger proportion of town that has a larger, or either a larger majority of one of the protected class voter groups, or they're not living in neat little pockets. In fact, one of the things we noticed when we looked at where people live within your city boundaries is that people are very well spread out. And that would be something actually to celebrate. But what it means is I can't draw you a district where you're going to have a majority Asian district or a majority Latino district in this case. And of course, African Americans are about 3% of the total population, so we couldn't get to a majority in any one district with African Americans either. But part of the goal of the California Voting Rights Act is to make sure that historically marginalized voters have the ability to elect a person of their choosing. And so in this case, we see that with District 3 and District 4, looking at the citizen voting age populations, we see that the protected class voters could form a coalition and have a majority in those two districts. Now, looking at the way this map is drawn, you see that the north side of town is divided by districts 1 and 2, and really uses Highway 20 and Highway 99 as typical guiding lines. There's a little bit of balancing on the east side of town with District 1. That's a population balance kind of jutting down, but really doing the best we can to follow those major arteries as dividing lines. As I said before, District 4 in this particular map has the highest population, Asian citizen voting age population of 34%, while District 3 has a 33% citizen voting age Latinx population. In this particular map, we have 2 council members paired in District 2. Moving on to the purple map. The purple map has a population deviation of 5.74%. This shows a slightly different way that we can draw the southern part of town, districts 3, 4, and 5. So it's just a slight derivation from the green map in that regard. Still meets all the same legal requirements. In this case, District 4 has the highest Asian population of 34% citizen voting age population, while Latinx and African Americans are relatively evenly distributed, not able to achieve plurality or majority in any other district. In this map, we also have 2 council members paired in District 2. This is the final map prepared by NDC. And so this map has a population, the orange map has a population deviation of 5.34%. This is wildly different for the purposes of being wildly different. You saw in the first 2 maps, you know, we followed those kind of traditional street boundaries and major dividing lines in town as you might expect. This map was attempting to provide an alternative. It still meets the legal requirements, though it weighs a little less heavily on the major dividing lines or major street boundary areas as the first 2 maps do. And so really this map was generated probably more for discussion purposes, so people could see what could be done. When we look at this map, we see that we have very similar numbers. District 3 has a Latinx 34% citizen voting age population, while District 4 has a 32% Asian citizen voting age population. What this map probably does the worst is observe the will of the voters in the last election. It pairs council members in 2 separate districts. So we have 4 council members paired in 2 districts. And so really not paying much attention to the will of the voters in the last election. Not an absolute legal requirement under federal state laws, but it is a traditional districting requirement. And to the extent that we weren't able to draw a 3rd map that really observed that as well as the first 2, I wanted to point that out. Then there was a question about whether or not it was possible to draw a map that kept all the council members separate. Certainly we can draw a map, but this map has concerns with the Fair Maps Act. And so that has to do with the way we're dividing up districts 3, 4, and 5 down in the south, specifically around what I would call the horseshoe where District 5 is. There could be different arguments made, and given the state of affairs with a lot of attorneys who are looking to put their name on the Citizen Voting Rights Act, I think this makes a good discussion map, and certainly it could be used for arguments about potential changes to any of the other 3 maps. I wouldn't suggest that the council consider moving forward with this particular map due to concerns for the Voting Rights Act. And so with that, the goal tonight is really to hear from the public, so that way the council can then weigh in, and then after you've had the public hearing, I would hope to hear from council, ideally with the goal that we would narrow down to 1 or 2 maps to move forward, or 1 or 2 maps with potential changes to move forward for the next meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I believe it's not queued up for me. We have to open a public hearing, correct? Thank you. So with that, I will open the public hearing, and we will see if there are any questions from the public at this time. And we do have a card. Heather Ashman.
Good evening again. We have people here tonight. Isn't that nice? The last time we did this, I was sitting here alone, I think. So, during the county process, I spent a lot of hours trying to put a map together. I was actually successful in increasing the size of District 4 to include a levy and more of the county. There was a lot of reasons for that, but I tried putting a map together for the city, and there are so many corners, there are so many things that you have to consider. It was really hard not to try to be able to improve on green or purple. I want to point out something about the demo map, and I think that, I don't know what his name is, was presenting here. If you want to try to avoid the look of gerrymandering, I think that would be kind of a questionable map, considering it basically separates all sorts of communities. Clearly, the South is underrepresented in any of these maps. As you can see, the Southeast in particular has no representation in the current city council or in that one in particular, because it would be easy to have somebody from the more northerly sections take over. It also has a 7% deviation on the population than other maps, which all of them have 5%. And the reason why that's important, because this was discussed in the other meetings, is that you want to be able to avoid having to redraw your maps between censuses. Because if it's 7%, it would be very easy if one of the communities were to start to develop, and we know that there's some development interest in some of these areas to the south, that it would go over that 7% and get up to 10%, which would practically force you to redraw the maps. So you need to make them as close as possible at this time as you can, in case that's some sort of an impact during the development between now and the next 10 years. Orange was also very odd, has odd crossings of 99, and it splits school areas and it splits communities very clearly. Green and purple seem to be the only ones that have if you look at that one, you can see what, purple looks a bit odd, but that one still works. That one's the purple one, right? But anyways, the purple and the green seem to have the most congruent rule, as far as the rules, the communities kind of together. 99 really splits up pretty much a lot of the communities, but you're always going to have somebody in the middle. We have the same problem with the county maps. You're always going to have somebody that's in the middle that doesn't have any county at all. There's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, I just wanted to say, please be transparent. Don't be expedient. I know there's a map that will let you all stay in office. I get that. At first, I was going to say I would hate to have to lose either Mr. Harris, Councilman Harris, or Councilman Boomgard, because you end up in the same district. But please don't be expedient. Please think of the community and think of transparency. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thomas Burns. Hey, I've heard about this, but I haven't had a chance to really look into it at all. So maybe you can clarify for me. Is this redistricting thing, is this going to be where we vote, like right now when we vote for the city council, we vote, I think there's 3 people that run or something like that, or 3 offices. But is this going to be like, I live in District 1, I'll have to vote just for that little area and whoever is living in that area? Is
That
that
is
how it's going to
correct.
go? Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
Mike Morris, Queens Freeway. So, and I just want to bring this up because it's only obvious to me. So we can't do anything about it, but we're going to have to remap if we ever get the keyhole. The keyhole is what everybody's kind of arm wrestling over. But in that one, it looks like at least 3 members are going to be able to get feedback from the keyhole area as well. Right? Since there's the purple, green, and gold, it looks like to me, all 3 of those city members, or council members, are going to be able to get feedback from residents that live in there and everything. So that would be kind of a plus for those people.
Would either our city attorney or you, sir, like to address what would happen if we annex the keyhole area or any other areas to help him understand what would go on with the maps?
Absolutely. Wonderful question, and you bring up a great point. I probably could, given how long the meeting had gone with the first item, I didn't want to put people to sleep at the end of the night. One of the factors probably the most important factor when we draw districts is relatively equal population. And so we can have no more than a 10% variance between the highest overpopulated district to the lowest underpopulated district. And the reason we have to redraw lines every 10 years is specifically to account for changes in population, whether it be people moving within the boundaries or even annexing properties or new development. And so while some jurisdictions may make the choice to slightly underpopulate an area, a district they know is going to grow, you're still limited by that 10% total cap. And so if you have, for example, if you were going to build a new senior center or a major housing development, you can never account for that in one go. And which is why you have to redistrict in 10 years. There is no provision for doing a mid-year adjustment to true up because the federal courts have held that using the decennial census data is defensible.
Okay, thank you. And trust me, I'd love the city to get the keyhole.
All right. Any other comments from the public? Okay. Any online?
No public comment.
Any comments from the council?
You guys start. You have better answers than me.
This is for questions and direction, so it's back to the council. So. Yes.
Through the mayor? Yes, sir. Okay, so if we're going through the maps, I'm going with purple and/or green. And whichever scenario sequencing would best accommodate either of those maps.
Okay. Councilmember Harris?
If we're seeking input here through the mayor, I'm liking purple or green myself. I think if I had to choose between one of the two, I like purple. And I will admit that the sequencing has me a little bit confused, more than a little bit confused. I know that Wade and I are up in 3 years. You 3 are up in 1. But that's all I really know. The charts and things, are we supposed to pick a sequencing scenario here? And it's the hypotheticals we're choosing from?
There are I've given you confidential sequencing items as to how various combinations could work out.
Oh, my bad.
No worries, but there are recommended ones from the demographer as well. So if, for example, if you're inclined to go with the purple map, it has a sequencing that would be legally acceptable and would not create impermissible gaps in the city council. So if you were inclined to do the purple map, for example, that I think you mentioned, you could look at that sequencing and say the purple map with the sequencing that's suggested.
And I guess that's where got confused, is because the sequencing appears to be identical on both purple and green.
One of the reasons for that is because where the terms fall between the 3 versus the 2 and the at-large terms versus the districting terms.
Right.
We don't want to end up in a situation where we only have 4 council members or 3 council members because of the timing of when the elections are held. So if the council can give us direction tonight, I've heard 2 maps mention, the purple and green. The demographer and I can actually work and come back at the next meeting to show you how that sequencing could work in various sorts of ways. So it could give you additional information on that if you want it, because once it's narrowed down, we can run through scenarios better.
With the, just to expand very briefly, for those who aren't professional electeds, essentially it's important to recognize that no term will be cut short as a result of moving to districts. And so, for example, anybody who's in the 2022 election will be elected to their by-district seat, while the remaining council members stay at large until their election date in 2024.
I think with that being said, I like the purple map and the associated sequencing, just to get us started here. Thank you.
Councilwoman Espandola? Gordon?
Purple or green are fine by me. I think I was looking at green just because it seemed like on the purple map, District 3 was kind of plunging southward. It seemed like Districts 1, 3, and 5 were a little bit, I guess, in my mind, just a little bit more linear. But either one of those is fine by me, and I would agree with Councilman Harris. The sequencing of 1, 2, 3 on either maps is my preference.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Espandola?
I'm in agreement with green or purple. And so if we can bring some sequencing back to that, I mean, the sequence is there and the actual rollout out of that would be great.
Thank you. My comments on this is I too like the green or the purple. My first choice would be green. It does just seem to flow naturally more with the city. And then the suggested sequencing that you've suggested, 1, 2, 3 for both of those would be my recommendation. And I think that's really all that we need. I think you've got some direction from here with everyone seems to like the green and the purple. And it seems like I heard maybe 3 green preferences.
Green is fine with me, too.
So it looks like we're leaning
worries.
green. So,
No, through the mayor, nobody leaned green. We were saying purple and green, 3 of us. And Sean mentioned purple and you mentioned green.
that's what I'm trying to, I think. He preferred green, I preferred green.
Then I'm
I
clarified.
can go,
Thanks.
green's fine with me, too.
Okay.
I'm
It does-
green and purple.
Okay, so with the suggested sequencing,
Yep.
okay? And
Through the mayor.
Tappan.
So if we're understanding correctly, we will prepare a map for green with the suggested sequencing. We can also provide alternative sequencing to see how that looks for you. We will put out a notice ahead of the meeting of January 18th, which is next council meeting. It will be in Spanish and hopefully Punjabi as well, so that the public will be aware of it. And we'll get that published out at least 7 days ahead of time, so everybody's aware of what's happening. We will include if we can, a copy of the green map on it, just so people have a general idea what it looks like. Of course, it's going to be a little bit hard to see in the newspaper, or at the very least, a link. And then we will also provide you with some sample sequencing of how it will look under green. But we can then come back, and then if you like what you see, we can introduce it by ordinance, so there'll be 2 readings. It'll be the first reading at the next meeting, assuming you like what you see. If you want to change something, we need to renotice and redo another first reading. So I think that's the direction we have from the number of nods that are going around the city council. Robert, did you have any additional questions?
No, that would be the best ultimate conclusion. So we'll bring back the 2 maps with all the potential sequencing. So we'll give you 2 or 3 versions of green, 2 or 3 versions of purple with the right sequencing. So you'll just pick the one you like, introduce the ordinance, and move forward.
I think they had just green, unless I'm hearing. So we bring back just the green map. Am I correct, council?
Is that where we're leaning as a council?
Well, I saw four greens.
Yeah.
I'm not good at counting, but I usually can get,
Green. We're good.
okay. So we'll do the green, if that's okay with the city council, because then it helps define things a lot more for the purposes of staff as well.
Okay.
Thank you so much, council.
Thank you. Is anything else you need from us tonight, sir?
No, thank you. I appreciate the clear direction.
Okay. Thank you for sticking around with us and being here tonight. I appreciate it.
It's been a great learning opportunity.
And with that, I will close the public hearing.